In the spring of 1921, in a plain room in Berkeley, California, a young nursing student sat in a chair with a blood pressure cuff bound to her arm and a rubber tube tied about her chest, both of them feeding a machine that drew her heartbeat and her breathing as two wandering lines of ink on a slowly rolling drum of paper. Across from her sat the man who had built it, a young policeman, oddly enough, with a doctorate in physiology, the only officer in America who had one, asking her quiet questions about a series of small thefts in her dormitory, while the needles rose and settled with her pulse. The first famous case of the first lie detector. What happened between those two people is one of the loveliest things in tonight's file, so I'm going to hold it a while. It pays off where it belongs. Come in, friends. The lamp's trimmed low, and nothing in this room will ask you a single question all night. Set the day down anywhere. It is stopped taking testimony. Tonight is the lie detector, the box with the needles, the trained eye that reads faces, and the 100-year dream that people can be made readable. You've seen both machines 100 times, the interrogation room where the needles jump, and the newer one, the expert who catches the flicker at the corner of a mouth. We'll start where everyone starts, with the stories, the way television has always told them, and then walk back through what actually happened, person by person. Where the record keeps its counsel, I'll say so, and you may read it however you like. The road runs from a blood pressure cuff at Harvard to a Supreme Court sentence, and out again, from a naturalist's list of questions to the mountains of New Guinea, all the way to a television show that a real scientist graded, in public, week by week. And there's a golden lasso in this story, a real one, from the comic books, and I'm saving how it got there, because it is the best revenge in the whole file. If you drift before either machine gets its verdict, better still. Nothing tonight needs a witness. But first, the interrogation room, the way the story has always lit it. The story goes like this, told the same way for 80 years. A small room with a table. A suspect in the chair, sleeves rolled, wired at the arm, the chest, the fingertips. Beside him, the machine, a neat case of dials trailing its ribbon of paper. And behind it, the examiner, unhurried, a man who has seen everything and believes none of it. The questions begin softly. Name, address, whether it is raining. The needles draw their calm, even lines, learning the shape of the suspect's ordinary heart. Then, as the movies have it, the real question arrives. Where were you on the night in question? And the machine does what the whole legend rests on. It sees through him. The needles leap. The lines go jagged as a mountain range. Sweat stands on the lip. The examiner's eyebrow barely moves. Somewhere behind the mirror, detectives exchange a look. In this telling, the body is a traitor with perfect information. The mouth may lie, the story insists, but the heart cannot, and the machine is wired straight to the heart. Television keeps two iron rules. The guilty always spike, the innocent always pass. On those two rules hang every movie confession, every cop show montage, every offer you have ever heard a television suspect make. Hook me up, I'll prove it. The machine, as the story goes, cannot be fooled, cannot be beaten, cannot be argued with. It is the one witness in the room with no stake and no imagination. That is the box, as television tells it. And notice how comforting the telling is. In a world of unreadable strangers, It offers a room where the truth is mechanical, a place you could take every doubt you ever had and watch a needle settle it. Whether any of that survives what actually happened, hold the question. We'll walk it all the way back. Because that old scene has a newer, subtler cousin now, one that needs no wires at all. It watches your face. The newer story needs no machine at all, which is exactly its charm. As the story goes, there are people, trained, gifted, or both, who can read a lie off a human face the way the rest of us read a headline. The modern version arrived on television in 2009 in a series about a rumpled, brilliant scientist who studies faces for a living, called in when the police are stuck. You may have loved it. A great many people did. There is no shame anywhere in the loving. Hold that thought, because it has a twist worth waiting for. Its signature move is the freeze frame. A witness says she saw nothing. The camera closes on her face, and there, a single frame, a flicker at the corner of the mouth, a tightening around the eyes gone before an ordinary person could blink. The expert sees it. Contempt, he says quietly, or fear, or a grief she hasn't mentioned. And the case turns on that fraction of a second, the way the old interrogation scene turned on a jumping needle. The face always leaks, so this story insists. The truth is written on us faster than we can erase it, in a script only the trained can read. And the trained, on television, are very nearly never wrong. It is the box's dream with better manners. No wires, no chair, no sweat. Just attention, refined into something like X-ray vision. And it rests on real science by a real scientist, which is what makes this story different from most that pass through this room, and what will make its truth the most interesting part of the night. So there they are, the needle and the flicker, both promising the same impossible comfort, that people can be read. So much for how television tells it. What actually happened begins long before any box existed, with a naturalist mailing letters to the ends of the earth. The dream is older than any of its machines. It begins at a desk in the English countryside. In 1867, Charles Darwin, grey-bearded by then, working from his quiet house in Kent, printed a list of 16 questions about the human face and mailed it out to missionaries and settlers on 5 continents, begging each correspondent to report only what they actually observed, never what they remembered. Memory, he warned, deceives. Picture those letters going out in canvas mailbags, by steamship and pack animal, to mission stations and trading posts at the far ends of the earth, each carrying the same patient list. 15th on that list sat a question that contains this entire episode. Can guilty or sly or jealous expressions be recognized? 36 answers came back from around the world, in different hands, on different paper, describing the same faces. And the idea kept travelling, gathering machinery as it went. In Italy, a criminologist named Lombroso took to pressing a suspect's fist into a water-filled glove, watching the water level ride the man's pulse while the questions came. In America, a Harvard psychologist promised magazine readers that hidden feeling betrays itself against the will of the best actor alive. Different countries, different instruments, one conviction. Everyone was already certain the body told the truth. What remained was to build the instrument that could hear it. The man who claimed to have built it first was a Harvard man named William Moulton Marston, psychologist, lawyer, showman, a person constitutionally incapable of underselling anything. His inspiration, he liked to say, was his own wife, whose blood pressure seemed to climb whenever she got angry or excited. Science beginning, as it sometimes does, at the kitchen table with a husband taking notes. In 1917, he published the founding claim: a lie raises the systolic blood pressure, so repeated cuff readings during questioning can catch the liar. Not a machine yet, a technique, a cuff, a stopwatch, and Marston's considerable confidence, which was its own kind of instrument. The courtroom test came in 1923 in Washington. A young man named James Fry sat at the defense table on trial for his life, while his lawyers offered the court something no American court had been offered before: Marston's blood pressure readings, as proof their client was telling the truth. Imagine the room for a moment. The judge looking down at a proposal to let a rubber cuff testify. The prosecutor objecting. The young man watching a machine argue for him. The appeals court said no, in an opinion hardly 2 pages long, which held that a scientific technique must first have gained general acceptance in its own field. Fry was convicted. The young man went to prison carrying the name the rule would keep, and the law books remember the rule far better than the man. Marston's test was out, and those 2 pages, written to keep one blood pressure cuff away from one jury, hardened into the Fry standard, the rule that governed all scientific evidence in American courtrooms for the next 70 years. The lie detector's first gift to the law was the rule that keeps lie detectors out of court, where it stands to this day. And here comes the golden lasso I promised you. Marston, the blood pressure man the court had just turned away, never stopped believing. But he was done waiting for judges. In 1941, writing for a comic book publisher, he created a heroine, an Amazon princess with silver bracelets and a golden lasso, a rope that compels the truth from anyone it binds. Wonder Woman is the polygraph's second life, the machine the courts refused, reborn as a rope that cannot be appealed. Every child who ever watched that lasso glow was reading Marston's answer to those 2 pages from 1923. It is the best revenge in the whole file, and it is made of ink. The actual machine, though, the one with the drum and the ink and the future, was not built by the showman at all. It was built by gentler hands, in a police station unlike any other in America, by a man who would come to regret it more than anyone alive. To understand why the lie detector was born in Berkeley, you need the chief. August Vollmer took over that town's tiny police force in 1905 and spent a quarter-century building the strangest department in America. Bicycles, then motorcycles, then automobiles, then radios, a police school, university courses in criminology, patrolmen recruited off the college campus. The papers called them college cops. Above all, Vollmer wanted interrogation cleaned up. The standard American method of the era had a name, the third degree, and a federal commission would soon put its finding in writing. The deliberate infliction of pain to extract confessions was, in its words, widespread throughout the country. Vollmer's answer to the rubber hose was science. If the body itself would testify, nobody needed to be hurt into talking. The lie detector was conceived, in Berkeley at least, as an instrument of mercy. The man who built it was John Larson, the patrolman with the physiology doctorate, a serious, methodical immigrant son who had worked his way through school as a busboy and a stonecutter. In the spring of 1921, at Vollmer's urging, he combined the blood pressure cuff with a breathing tube and a rolling smoked drum into the first true polygraph. Both signals, drawn continuously, side by side in ink. A thing no department could buy, so a technician had to make it. Larson called it the cardiopneumopsychogram, a name with no future, A Berkeley newspaperman called it a lie detector, a name with nothing but. Now the room from the top of the night. Larson's first famous case was a string of small thefts in a university dormitory, and the young woman his machine pointed toward, the nursing student in the chair, cuff on her arm, needles tracing her heart, was named Margaret Taylor. Here is the payoff I promised. John Larson kept finding reasons to see her. The inventor of the lie detector courted the subject of his first famous test, bought a ring, married her. The truth machine's origin story is, underneath the paperwork, a courtship. And the file adds its quiet asterisk. Whether the dormitory case was ever truly solved, whether the girl the machine first accused was guilty of anything at all, no one knows. The record leaves it genuinely open. The first famous lie detector case ends in a wedding and an open question, which is this whole subject in one sentence. Watching all of it, through a doorway, stood a teenager named Leonard Keeler, named for Leonardo da Vinci by his poet father, a boy who had paid for schooling by milking rattlesnakes for antivenom. By his own circle's account, the first polygraph test he ever witnessed gave his life its purpose on the spot. Keeler grew up to build the box the world knows, a portable case, 16 inches by 8, with a sprocket-driven paper roll and a dial on the panel, and a patent, it is worth saying slowly, that never once uses the words lie, deception, or detector. He added the showman's touch the movies still carry, the card trick. Pick a card, any card, while the cuff hums on your arm. The examiner reads the chart, turns over your card. From that moment you believe the machine can see you. Keeler carried the box east to Chicago and set up in the city's new scientific crime laboratory, running his device on the biggest cases of the era while reporters watched. He sold it to police departments, banks, and corporations, making Chicago, the machine's historians agree, the polygraph capital of the world. Where Larson had built a research instrument, Keeler built a business, and the business was persuasion. And Larson, the inventor, the methodical one, he watched what his machine became and recoiled from it for the rest of his life. In a letter written near the end of it, he called the device a Frankenstein's monster he had spent 40 years combating. The father of the lie detector died its most persistent critic. To see what his monster had become out in the world, follow the box out of Berkeley, into the interrogation rooms, the personnel offices, and one atomic city. The courts, you'll remember, had barred the door, so the box never had the courtroom career the movies give it. Its real life happened everywhere else, and the record is plain about what it actually did there. It collected confessions. Picture the interrogation room as examiners themselves described the work. Any of 1,000 mid-century rooms all running the same play. A suspect, wired up, watching ink needles wander across paper he cannot read. The examiner studies the chart, frowns gently, taps a line, then says, "The machine shows trouble on that last question. Is there something you'd like to clear up?" Nothing in that sentence depends on the machine being right. It depends on the suspect believing it is, and mid-century America believed. People confessed to the box in numbers no rubber hose ever produced, which let its champions claim, with honest arithmetic, that it worked. It did work, the way a stage works. The card trick was the whole method in miniature. Convince a man the machine sees him, and he will hand over what the machine never saw. Then the box went federal, and the man carrying it was Keeler himself. In the last summer of the war, his small corps of examiners had worked through a prisoner of war camp in Rhode Island. Nearly 18,000 German prisoners tested, one after another, in the biggest single screening anyone had ever run. And in 1946, the box arrived at the gates of the atomic city itself, Oak Ridge, Tennessee, where Keeler personally examined 850 members of the weapons staff, including, the record notes with a straight face, scientists of the highest class and order. 6 Nobel laureates worked on that program at the time. Picture it, the men who had split the atom filing one by one into a small room to be questioned by a rattlesnake milker's machine. The agencies followed in the years after: security clearances, periodic reviews, the quiet understanding that a career could turn on a chart. The machine the courts would not trust with one man's verdict was trusted by the government with everyone's. Keep the two ledgers separate, because honesty requires it. On one page, real confessions, real cases closed, a real alternative to the beatings it replaced. The box's defenders were not making that up. On the other, everything rested on belief. A machine whose power is theatrical has a special weakness, one the legend never mentions. It is helpless against exactly the person who does not believe in it and can stay calm inside it. History produced that person and gave him a government badge and a quiet office. His is the stillest chapter in the box's whole story. It begins with a man sitting down in the chair, twice. His name was Aldrich Ames, a career officer of the Central Intelligence Agency. In May of 1986, 1 year into selling his country's secrets to Moscow, he sat for a full agency polygraph. A small government room, the cuff on his arm, the needles tracing away. The very ritual television swears cannot be fooled. The Senate's own report on the case records what the chart showed: consistently deceptive responses on the question of whether a foreign service had approached him. He offered a mild explanation about everyone worrying over the Soviets. The examiner accepted it, judged him truthful, then noted him down as a bright, direct man. 5 years later, still spying, he passed again. 2 sessions, 4 days apart. Now the detail that closes the circle on everything the box ever was, and it deserves its own breath. Asked afterward whether Moscow had trained him to beat the machine, Ames said no. No training at all. The only advice his handlers ever gave him was a single sentence: just relax, don't worry, you have nothing to fear. Think of what that means. The machine that ran on belief was beaten by the simple absence of it. Nothing more was ever required. The cost of what he sold is carried here in one level sentence, as it should be. Good men who had trusted America were lost in Moscow because of him, while no needle ever moved. From prison, years later, Ames wrote a letter about the machine he had beaten twice. His verdict survives, postmarked November of 2000. The polygraph, he wrote, is junk science that just won't die. Say what you will about the witness, and he is among the worst men in this show's whole catalogue. The demonstration stands. The instrument built to catch exactly him had him in the chair, twice, and called him honest. After Ames, the reckoning came in 3 verdicts, and I'll take them slowly, one at a time. The first came from Congress. In 1988, a law banned lie detector screening by most private employers. No more polygraphs at the supermarket or the bank, while exempting the government, which kept its own, barred from the mailroom, retained at the agencies, and I'll leave that sentence exactly where it stands. The second verdict came from the scientists. In 2003, the National Research Council, the country's own council of researchers, asked at last to read a century of studies cover to cover, delivered its review in calm, final language. The machine measures arousal, not deception. For there is no unique lie response in the human body, and its true performance sits, in the report's most quoted line, well above chance, though well below perfection. Countermeasures, the report added, can be learned. Screening a whole workforce must either drown the loyal in false alarms or let the rare spy through, which is the AIM story, retold as arithmetic. The third verdict was the deepest. It had come from the Supreme Court in 1998, in a single sentence the movies have never absorbed. In the American trial system, the jury is the lie detector. Picture that machine. 12 ordinary people in 2 rows of chairs, unwired, watching a witness's face the old way, the way faces have been read since before there were courts. So the box's century ends, not defeated exactly, but measured, found to be mostly a story we told the nervous, just as its own inventor had spent 40 years saying. Which leaves the other machine, the one made of attention, the trained eye from the top of the night. Its story is the warmest one I have for you. It belongs to a boy who had a reason to learn what faces hide. Remember Darwin's envelope, the 16 questions mailed to the ends of the earth, the 36 answers describing the same faces. A century later, that old question landed in the hands of the man who would spend his life testing it. Paul Ekman came to faces early and hard. At 14, he lost his mother, whose sadness he had watched and could not stop. By his own telling, he decided then to spend his life building the kind of knowledge that might help the next person like her. The road ran through an army posting, where a would-be therapist turned into a researcher, and then, in 1967, to the highlands of New Guinea, to settle Darwin's question the only way it could be settled. The problem with every earlier study was television. If faces look the same in Tokyo and Topeka, perhaps that only proves everyone watches the same movies. Ekman needed people who had never seen a screen, so he went to the South for and set a ferocious bar for who could take part. No films ever watched, no English spoken, no life in a settlement, no work for an outsider. Only about 3% of that whole people qualified. Then the method, which is a scene worth standing in. 3 teams working a village at once. A 4-man telling a short story aloud. A visitor recording answers while deliberately looking down at his booklet. Faces averted, so that no flicker of the checker's own expressions could tip the answer. And before the subject, 3 photographs of faces. Point to the person in the story. A whole village, most of it, in under 3 hours. The stories were built like little lullabies, each aimed at exactly one feeling. Her friends have come. She is happy. His child has died. He feels very sad. Grief, allowed in and let pass in a single breath. And for fear, a long one, shaped so nothing in it could read as anger or surprise. A person alone in a house, in an empty village, no knife and no axe, and no bow in the walls, while a wild pig stands in the doorway, stands and stays, and the pig won't move away from the door. Half the world away from any cinema, the 4 listened, looked at the 3 faces, then pointed. They pointed where we point. Happiness found the smiling face nearly every time. Grief found the grieving one. The children, tested with pairs, were right on every discrimination they were given. Darwin's 36 letters had been telling the truth. The face's basic vocabulary is human, not cultural. And the loveliest detail in the whole study is the failure, because there was one, exactly one, which the paper reports as plainly as its triumphs. The four could not reliably tell fear from surprise. Shown the wild pig story, some pointed to the astonished face instead. A wild pig in your doorway, the Highlands seemed to answer, is both. That honest crack, printed forever in the results table, is worth more than 100 tidy successes. It is the signature of a scientist reporting what he found rather than what he hoped. Ekman came home with the atlas of the shared face still unwritten. Writing it would take a decade, a colleague, and, of all things, some needles. What Ekman and his collaborator Wallace Friesen did next belongs among the patient feats of science. To map expression honestly, they decided, you could not start from feelings and work outward. You had to start from the machinery. So the two of them spent the better part of a decade cataloguing every movement the human face can make, learning, muscle by muscle, to fire each one on command in their own faces, sitting across from mirrors and cameras, hour after hour. And when a muscle refused to answer on its own, verifying with a needle electrode in the cheek that they had found the right one. Two grown scientists, twitching one eyebrow region at a time, for years. The result, published in 1978, was the Facial Action Coding System, an atlas that describes any expression a face can hold as a combination of numbered muscle actions, still in use everywhere faces are studied. Not a lie detector, a dictionary. The flicker came from somewhere sadder, and its origin is worth keeping carefully. Years earlier, reviewing film of a psychiatric patient, a woman who, the case record says, had smiled and reassured her doctors while privately intending to end her life, admitting it herself before a weekend pass out of the hospital was granted. Ekman and Friesen ran the footage slowly, frame by frame, looking for what the doctors had missed at full speed. And there it was, across a fraction of a second, between the smiles, a look of naked despair, gone again before an ordinary eye could register it. They called such flashes micro-expressions, moments, in their description, when a concealed feeling escapes onto the face faster than its owner can catch it. Not a lie made visible, only a feeling that was meant to stay hidden. Note the birthplace, because the legend always forgets it. The micro-expression was discovered in the service of care, a tool meant to help doctors see suffering through a brave face, not a trick for catching criminals. Could it catch them anyway? Ekman's group looked for naturals and reported finding a rare few. Out of tens of thousands of people tested on lie detection tasks over the years, a small circle of individuals, mostly seasoned professionals, who scored startlingly well again and again. They called them wizards. The skeptics answered with arithmetic rather than anger. Test 20,000 people on anything, the critics wrote, and chance alone will crown a few dozen champions who cannot repeat the feat. Whether the wizards were a discovery or a statistical mirage, nobody knows. The question remains genuinely unsettled. Both camps published, neither yielded. The sample of wizards was always too small to force the issue. So here is where the eye's story honestly stands. The shared face is real. The atlas is real. The flicker is real. What has never been established? Hold this gently, because what comes next is about the people who did not hold it gently. is that any of it reliably catches liars. A real phenomenon is not the same thing as a working detector. The distance between those two is where television came in, with the largest megaphone the dream ever had. In 2009, the Eye got its own show, one whose name you may know very well, Lie to Me. Its hero was a deception expert named Cal Lightman, brilliant, rumpled, reading guilt off a cheekbone in the space of a commercial break. Openly modelled on Paul Ekman, this was no loose borrowing. Ekman was the show's credited scientific consultant, contracted to review every script for accuracy, and by his own account he took the job reluctantly, only after being told the show would go forward with or without him. He set his terms in advance, and they are a small portrait of the man. The character could not be American, could not be married, could not have a personality anything like his own. So the screen got a British, divorced, glowering Lightman, while the real Ekman, married for over 30 years, admitted freely that he had never once interviewed a suspect in a criminal investigation. The interrogation room the show lived in was never his room, and every week, at his desk with the new script, he marked where the fiction had wandered. Then, after each episode aired, published his corrections on the network's own website, a column called The Truth About Lie to Me, a running report card on his own television double for anyone who wanted the real version. The show ran 3 seasons and planted the reading eye in millions of living rooms. There is nothing to apologize for in having loved it. It was a well-made hour about a genuinely real body of science. But listen to what the scientist said about his own television double, because it is the most honest sentence in this whole strand. Asked how he compared with Lightman, Ekman answered, "Lightman is always more certain than I am about everything. There is the entire gap between the story and the science, measured by the one man who stood in both. On television, the flicker convicts by the second commercial. In the laboratory, the man the character was built from kept saying, over and over, in print and on stage, an expression tells you a feeling is present. It does not tell you why. A flash of fear on a face in an interrogation room might be a guilty man fearing capture, or an innocent man fearing disbelief. No atlas ever printed can tell those two fears apart." Ekman even had a name for the trap. He called it Othello's error, after the husband who read his innocent wife's terror as proof of guilt. While the show was airing, the dream it sold was already running a real operation. Picture an ordinary airport morning, the queue at the checkpoint, shoes in bins, with a few officers standing off to the side, trained not to search bags, but to watch faces. The government had built a whole screening program on that watching. Behavioral observation, it was called. The freeze frame flicker scaled up to a national checkpoint. It grew for years. By the time the auditors added it up, some $900 million had gone into it. Then the accounting came. In 2013, the Government Accountability Office reviewed the evidence for spotting deception by demeanor and reported that 400 separate studies put human ability at, its words, the same as or slightly better than chance. The recommendation followed plainly. Stop funding it. And a colleague of Ekman's from the deception world, a professor named Mark Frank, gave the finding its shortest form. There is no Pinocchio effect. No twitch, no glance, no crossed arms that means lying. In anyone, everywhere, the way the legend needs it to. Mark the symmetry, because the night has been building it quietly. The box's century ended with a federal report saying arousal is not deception. The eyes story arrives at a federal report saying demeanor is not deception either. Two machines, a century apart, one of brass, one of attention, walking into the same wall from opposite sides. Which raises the obvious question a patient listener has surely been holding. What about the new machines, the brain scanners, the algorithms? Surely somebody by now has gotten past the wall. Somebody certainly tried. A psychologist from Tennessee, lying very still inside a magnet, and his story is the strangest echo of the night. The newest machines skipped the body altogether and went straight to the source. In the early 2000s, companies formed around a bold proposition. Put a person in a brain scanner, ask the questions there, then read deception off the pattern of blood moving through the brain itself. No more needles, no more charts of sweat and breath. The lie caught at last in the organ that makes it. One firm called itself No Lie MRI, which at least had the virtue of stating its business plainly. The test case has a name, and his is one of the gentlest strange stories of the night. Dr. Lorne Semrau, a Tennessee psychologist in his 60s, accused in a billing dispute, agreed in 2010 to become the first American to offer a brain scan as courtroom proof of his own honesty. The company's founder scanned him free of charge, a landmark case being worth more than a fee, and Semrau lay in the machine while his brain was recorded answering. The company scored him truthful, eventually. Because here is the detail worth underlining twice. On one set of questions, the scan first came back deceptive, so the company's own founder, citing his protocols, simply ran it again, whereupon it came back truthful, that second result being the one offered to the court. The founder himself, Dr. Stephen Lacan, conceded in testimony that the method had, in his words, a huge false positive problem. A truth machine with a re-roll is a strange kind of oracle. The court said no. Listen to how, because a century folds in half here. The judge examined the brain scanner the way a judge in 1923 had examined Marston's blood pressure readings. Asked what the error rate was in real cases as opposed to laboratory games, where volunteers tell pretend lies with nothing at stake, while Semrau was a man in his 60s facing prison. Found nobody could say, then ruled the scan out. An appeals court agreed. That same spring, in Brooklyn, a judge turned away another brain scan offer in a workplace dispute, with a line you have heard before tonight, worded almost the same way. Credibility is a matter solely for the jury. Nobody's scan was ever admitted over objection in an American courtroom. By all appearances, though neither company ever announced it, the brain scan lie detection business quietly went the way of the water-filled glove. Stand back and look at what just happened, because it is the quiet rhyme of the whole night. The rule that turned the brain scanner away was Fry, the very rule born in 1923 when a court turned away James Fry's blood pressure cuff. 90 years and the doorway has the same keeper, asking every new machine the same old question. Not, is this impressive, but is this known to work? A court in the age of radio and a court in the age of magnets, giving the same answer in almost the same words. And the newest wave is already here, wearing the oldest promises. Algorithms trained on faces, systems piloted at borders that watch a traveller's expression for signs of deceit as a virtual guard asks the questions. Voice stress software sold to police departments, each arriving, as every machine before it arrived, with a confident accuracy figure trailed by a wave of unsettled scientists. Nobody should laugh at any of this. Some of it may yet come to something. But notice, patiently, that we have now watched this exact procession 4 times. Cuff, eye, scanner, algorithm. While the wall in the middle has not moved. There is no unique signature of lying, not in the pulse, not on the face, not, so far, in the blood of the brain. The dream keeps building new machines because the wish underneath is permanent. And the wish, not the wiring, was always the engine. One kind thing left to do. Say goodnight to both machines and to the 2 men who built and doubted them. So let the 2 machines stand side by side one last time at their honest weights. The box, born in Berkeley as an act of mercy, married off in its first famous case, barred from the courtroom in its 2nd year of life, yet employed for a century anyway, because it worked as theatre when it never worked as measurement, and theatre, it turns out, collects real confessions. The eye, born from a boy's grief, proven in the Highlands where a wild pig stood in a doorway, mapped muscle by muscle into an honest dictionary, then handed a megaphone that promised more than its own author ever claimed. Neither machine was a fraud. Both were dreams that outran their evidence, while the evidence, patiently gathered for 100 years, keeps saying the same gentle thing. People are harder to read than we wish, with a mercy hidden in that. Remember the 2 men the night belongs to. John Larson, who built the first machine and spent 40 years calling it his monster, the inventor as the invention's conscience. And Paul Ekman, who died just last autumn at 91, having spent a lifetime proving something true. The shared face, the flicker of hidden feeling, while insisting, more carefully than his admirers ever did, on what it could not do. The character on television was always more certain than he was. That was the difference between them, the difference between a story and a science. He knew it, said it out loud, kept working anyway, which is about as well as anyone has ever carried a famous idea. And the lasso. One last look at the strangest thread of the night. The man who helped invent the lie detector went on to invent Wonder Woman, giving her a golden rope that compels the truth from anyone it holds. Marston put the dream in its honest final form, a magic lasso in a comic book, where a promise like that belongs. Every machine since has been an attempt to build that rope out of rubber tubing, ink, or magnets, while the Supreme Court's answer still stands at the door where Fry left it. The jury is the lie detector. 12 ordinary faces, reading yours, the old unwired way. As for you, nobody is reading your face tonight. The needles are still, the cameras are off. The only witness left in the room is the dark, which has never asked anyone a question. Whatever is written on your face right now, and by this hour I'd guess it is not much, you may keep it entirely to yourself. The house keeps no charts. Sleep well, friend. The file is closed. And that is where I'll leave it. Thank you for keeping me company tonight. If you are still awake and this one stayed with you, I would be glad to know of it. A review if you are moved to leave one. A suggestion for a story you would like told. A gentle correction if I have gotten something wrong. But none of it is for now. It can keep until morning. There is nothing left to do. Let the room stay quiet and let yourself rest. I will be here.